Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at Spunky Old Broad 1 or reach out to me on our website at spunkyoldbroad.com. And now, back to the show. Hi, everyone. I have a really interesting guest for you today. Her name is Alexandra Stockwell, and she's an MD. And believe it or not, she was a physician and then turned into a relationship and intimacy expert, which I think is amazing. And she specializes in conscious partnership. As a wife of 25 years and the mother of four, she believes the key to passion, fulfillment, intimacy, and success in a couple's relationship isn't compromise, it's being unwilling to compromise. Well, we'll talk about that, won't we? She teaches committed couples how to shift from thinking that long term relationships are where passion goes to die to discovering how to create the exquisite, emotional, and sensual intimacy that they crave. She's been showing men and women how to bring pleasure and purpose into all aspects of life for 20 years, from the daily grind of running a household to ecstatic experiences in the bedroom. Welcome, Alexandra.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carson. I am so grateful to be here. I just love the community you've built, and I'm grateful to become a participant in it.
Well, thank you. I've got tons and tons of questions for you before I even get into what we're supposed to talk about. And that is, well, the first one is, why did you leave medicine? I mean, you go to school for many, 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 many years, and it's very prestigious to be a doctor and very stable. And then you say you did it for something far more valuable. But yet, med school is med school. So tell us a little bit about that.
I will, but I'm going to have to bring you into my world because I completely understand that question. And that question, I get that from people of every generation. It's a particular question for people in the baby boomer age range, but even people in their 20s ask me that. So the answer is that I did. I went to college. I went to medical school. I was a medical resident, and then I had my own small holistic medical practice. And the whole time that I was studying for exams, I was in school, I was working hard, I was working typically 90, 100 hours a week. Nowadays there are laws restricting how long you can have consecutive contact with patients. But when I was training, I routinely did 36-hour shifts and went home to sleep and started at 6 in the morning the next day. So that was my life. And I loved practicing medicine. I felt so privileged and so energized to serve patients in their time of need. And of course, yes, prestige, professional, stable, financially solid, all of that. And I always was working for the next thing. First I was working to get into medical school, then to pass those exams, then to get into the right residency, and so on and so forth. And then I was at the place where, in principle, I'd arrived. Did I have a big, huge amount of money saved up? No, not yet. But I had arrived, and I realized that doing things the way I was with the standard of excellence I maintained, I was compromising myself. I prioritized my patients over my family. If I was on call, and I was quite often, I didn't get that many calls because of how my practice was set up, but I was on call all the time. And in my thoughts, I prioritized my patients over my family and my family over myself. And I don't actually think anybody suffered along the way, but if I had continued doing that for 5, 10, 25, 30 years, I would have been squandering what Mary Oliver describes as this one precious life. And I really wanted to figure out how to come from full rather than just steadily depleting myself.
Well, it's interesting. Maybe that's why so many doctors belong to group practices now. Maybe that's why many of the medical groups are being bought up by companies and so forth, because it's different how they're practicing medicine today. Not always good, do I think, but how they're practicing. And I know that I just recently had to switch primaries because the primary I've had three primaries like in 3 years. I had one for a long time, and then they started changing rapidly, and the communication is terrible. I mean, in fact, I'm under an oncologist's care right now, and he said, "Would you mind taking all these papers to your primary, because evidently they're not getting to him. He has no record of what I'm doing with you." So I literally hand carried my papers over to their office, which was a job and a half because parking is terrible where he is. And, just to drop them off was 30 minutes, parking, getting them to take the car, then getting them to bring the car back. And all I had to do was go upstairs, hand the papers, and come down. But it all was a 30-minute process. So it's a big
And
change.
you are such a high functioning woman. I mean, across the board, you're a high functioning woman, but there are so many patients, either due to their general ability to navigate practical things in life or because they're sick, cannot do that. I mean, it's really a travesty that needed to happen. And happily, yes, it's half an hour inconvenience, but you're actually able to do it without anything but the loss of the time.
Well, that's true. That's very true. And, again, I'm not the kind of person who feels sorry for myself, so I muddle through everything. But it is a change in how medicine is being practiced. I will tell you, though, I think one of the best functioning offices that I've been to is my oncologist. I get taken on time. My treatment is done on time. The only thing I have to wait for sometimes is the medicine, because it's refrigerated, so it has to cool, it has to warm up and so forth. But
Yes, yes.
other than that, everything is pretty much run on time. My blood tests, everything comes out on time, which is fabulous. But I wanted to ask you something else. I said in your introduction about teaching couples, committed couples, how to. There is a difference, right?
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
how to shift from thinking that long-term relationships are where passion goes to die. Someone I spoke with yesterday said that most marriages end up in divorce. I think she gave me the number of 67%. And that today, more and more long term marriages of 25 and 30 years are actually getting divorced. So my question is, you know, why? I guess that's a big question. Why? And is it because of the intimacy, or because of the lack of passion, or is it just people get tired of each other, or do they just stay together because of the kids until the kids are out of the house?
That is the golden question. And as with pretty much anything important, there's the very simple answer, and then there's the very complex, nuanced, expanded, inclusive, like super inclusive response. And I want to give you both. And the simplest answer, in my opinion, and this isn't something people research that I'm aware of, but at the most basic level, it's that people can't be who they really are. They can't be themselves in their relationships. And it's also due to a lack of education. I mean, when you want to be excellent at medicine, golfing, being an author, whatever it is that you aspire to do well, there is inevitably someone whom you can look up to and really admire. And even though you do your own thing, you can build on the lessons learned from observing that person. And as mammals, we learn through imitation. That is true from the beginning of life all the way to the end, that our basic way to learn as mammals is through imitation. And when it comes to relationships, there is a real dearth of models. Like, we may admire the relationship, your parents had or your grandparents, but it's not a relationship that you want to participate in now because times have changed. And so I think the lack of education of how to really create a rich, nourishing, gratifying, juicy, free relationship is lacking. And the consequences that people feel they can't be true to themselves. Now, people are going to express that second point in all kinds of different ways. But fundamentally, that's the thing that I'm referring to when I speak about compromise. There's only so long someone is going to be okay compromising who they are when we no longer have the kind of, I don't want to say pressure, but societal norms and financial norms. There aren't as many things that are like glue from the outside to hold the relationships together. And from the inside, when there's compromise and lack of education, people kind of lose interest.
Well, I guess maybe that's why I was very fortunate. My mom and dad had a wonderful relationship. My mom did not work outside of the home except for when my sister and I went to college. She went to work to help out, and she quit when we finished. But my father was a professional, never made a huge amount of money, but he was a professional. And in fact, he was a pharmacist, and he was president of the New York State Pharmaceutical Association. And he was considered like the doctor. He was in a little small town of 10,000 people, but he was like the town doctor. Everybody came to him for advice, and he was a real old-time pharmacist, But, then, and I really think that my grounding and my background and all of that really helped to where I am today. But the wonderful thing is that my son has said to me, the best thing in my life is that I had you and Daddy as parents. Now, how many kids say that? So I guess I was very fortunate. And my husband and I had a wonderful relationship for 45 years until he passed away. So it's really interesting to see couples who I can't even imagine staying together if I didn't really have this commitment and this passion and this admiration and this respect. I think respect had a lot to do with it too. So, because I saw some pretty horrible things in business and things like that, and my husband was as honest as the day is long, and I mean, he knew how to deal. He was a deal maker, but he was honest. And I just in fact, I look at everything that's going on in our political world right now, and I think, who do you believe, who's really telling the truth? Because they're coming out with so many things that are, no, we have it on tape. We have it on, we have it on film. We have it on, there it is. I mean, everybody is followed today. There's no way that you can escape what you've said. So it's all very interesting. But how did you come to this work in particular? I mean, I understand the holistic part of medicine, and I have a holistic doctor who's helping me, with the oncology and the effects and so forth. But you went from, being an MD to working on relationships. So where did that come from?
Well, I'm going to answer that, and I'm also going to respond to something you said, because I really do think we'll circle around to it, but honesty is the key to a passionate relationship. And the other thing which contributes to couples separating very often is that a woman gets her identity as a wife, and she yearns to really feel like a woman. And you clearly have lived a life where you had so much to contribute to your identity with all of your professional and personal achievements. And I think like being a mother is so good, and it's not enough at a certain point. And that's really the key, is can someone also really feel like a woman in the context of their relationship? And that is something which is relevant for me, because when I first took a sabbatical, I kind of knew I wasn't going to go back, but I set it up as a sabbatical from medicine. And I really went on a personal journey. In fact, one of the significant moments was I have 4 children, and my oldest is a girl, and when she turned 9, it was the morning of her birthday, and she was just radiant and joyful and wholesome and just this wonderful, wonderful human being, radiant. And and it shocked me because I realized things were going on in my life. My parents were getting divorced, and there was no part of me that felt that way when I was 9 years old. And I knew, again, because mammals learn through imitation, and as human beings we're mammals, that either I needed to access more of my own joy, or living at home for another 9 years, she would end up inevitably dialing down her own radiance because I was the model she would be following. And that really inspired me, and I started on a whole personal growth journey. I became a student at the School of Womanly Arts in New York, and I took all kinds of different personal growth workshops and read books and did therapy and really found my own joy. And in that journey, I took a training which was on sensuality and sexuality and really nourishing erotic chemistry. And it was a training as well as something that anyone could take. And I took it for my own gratification and delight and to nurture my marriage. And I thought on a lark, well, I'll participate in some of the practice labs in coaching. And after the first one, I thought, this is for me. I get to bring so much of what I learned and my expertise from medicine into coaching, and I can do it in this very targeted, transformative way. So I want to be very clear. I do not practice medicine, but of course I draw on my life experience as a physician.
Well, sure. And it's very interesting because, you know, there's a couple of things that you said. First of all, talking about when you were 9, when I was 3, I told my mom, I'm never getting married and I want a career. I was 3 years old, okay? And I mean, I dated like crazy. I was very popular and I dated like crazy, but I had no intention of getting married. My husband asked me to marry him for almost 3 years before I said yes, and I was dating other people the whole time. I really, really didn't want to get married, but I saw after dating all these crazy people that the kind of person he was. He had 2 kids and he had custody of them way back in 1960, so you can imagine. And
That is amazing.
yeah, it was amazing. And I saw how he took care of them, and what he did on the salary he was making, which was next to nothing. And, you know, I thought, this is a good man. Now, I was attracted to him physically. He was exactly what I was looking for physically, because I always said I was going to marry a blonde with blue eyes, and he was. And, you know, but I still, I just had no desire to get married. Plus, I was in business. So we only dated at 9 or 10 at night because that was the only time I had. And it was really interesting. I always make more money than he did. And he said, great. He said, I can buy more toys. You know, it's fine with me. And he never questioned where I went or who I was with or anything. And I would say, truthfully, I was married for 15 years before anyone even knew I was married because I didn't wear a wedding ring because he had made a comment about something. I think 3 days after we were married, I had this beautiful wide wedding band, and it got I under the band it got very my skin got bad because I was washing dishes with it and so forth. And he made a comment when I took the band off, and I said, "Oh, well, I'm not ever going to put it on again." I never did. And he wore a wedding band. He always wore a wedding band. So it was just a crazy situation, but we had the best time and we had fun. We had lots of issues, you know, with kids, and then I got pregnant right away. So here was a woman in business that in the first 13 months of marriage had 3 kids under the age of 7. And that was not easy for me. So there were a lot of things that had to be adjusted, but we loved each other and he was great. So I had no complaints. But you talked about some of the training that you had. So is
May,
that
may
what?
I just say, Dr.
Yeah.
Carson, you are the an ultimate example of an uncompromising marriage. You didn't give up anything, and you got so much from marrying. And that is really, I think, the key to it. You didn't, like, there was nothing important to you that you gave up, and you described, sure, there were new challenges and new gratifications. That's really exactly what I'm teaching people.
And there were adjustments, of course. I mean, there were things that I could no longer do, but it was really great. Well, we're coming to the end of this first part. We've just got about 4 or 5 minutes left. So I want to ask you, the training that you went through,
Yes.
uh, is that how you train to be a relationship and an intimacy expert, or are there other avenues?
Yeah, so I think this may be very slowly beginning to change, but the training that I did, some of it was actual professional training and some of it was personal training. But everywhere that I went, every training I did, people were young or they were single and or they were polyamorous, meaning they had multiple partners at the same time, or they were into particular fetishes, whatever the case may be. I did meet some single parents, but I did not in any of my trainings meet another woman who was married with children and living a busy, what I'm going to call regular life. And
Interesting.
it
That's
took
very interesting.
it very interesting, and it took a lot of courage initially. I mean, I think as a human being, you can learn anything. So initially, it took a lot of courage, and then it was just really no big deal because I was just in very unusual situations because it was people living on the edge who were willing to explore things and really get underneath the shame and unpack and demonstrate things that typically you never get to see. And again, we learn through imitation. So I got a lot of education being in the presence of other people doing more intimate things. And I took all of that, and sometimes it was a little complicated, but often actually I could just get to the essence of it and translate it into my own marriage. And I have a great marriage. I mean, we are collaborators in life and have a very juicy connection. But that wasn't true initially. I mean, for one reason, because we were both working 90, 100 hours a week. When we were together, we could just barely stay awake. But I learned how to do that in my own relationship, and I feel like that's one of my gifts to the world, is to really translate fairly edgy topics for people who are married, working, busy, and I guess my picture will be up wherever this interview is shown. And I don't have any piercings. I don't particularly show cleavage. Like I'm a regular. I don't stand out. You don't look at me and think sex.
Mm-hmm.
And that has really allowed me to build bridges into these very important topics in a way that's not confronting and very safe for people.
That's very interesting, especially when you comment about the people who were in these programs and classes with you, that it was very, very different and very, I'm amazing you you stayed. And it just shows that the testimony to you, Alexandra, because, when you see people who are not like you, the tendency is, this is not for me. And I really commend you for sticking it out and learning what you had to and doing it in a variety of ways. I mean, you didn't go to just one place. You studied a lot of things, you read a lot of books, and all of that, contributes to who you are. Well, we're almost down to our end of this part, and when we come back, we're gonna talk a lot about, you know, um, how you keep passion alive, in long-term relationships, and what are some of the techniques to create that, and also, about baby boomers, what are their challenges in creating relationships. So stay tuned, people. We'll be back with Dr. Alexandra Stockwell.